Hello and welcome from Mexico City to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where I normally have conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them that have some connection to Latin America. Today's episode is a little bit different. In honor of WeXchange, which is next week in Asunción, Paraguay, we're going to do this a little different. We went back to previous episodes to highlight 7 women from both sides of the table to share their experiences of what it's like being a woman in technology in the region. WeXchange is a conference started by the IDB and co-founded by Susana Garcia Robles to support women entrepreneurs in Latin America and the Caribbean. Really excited to take part next week. We start this episode off with Jackie Hyland from A55, a debt provider in Latin America which helps startups get the funding they need without taking dilution. She talks about why having women in technology is important. Next up is Komal Dadlani of Lab4U, who talks about her experience starting a company as a female founder in science. Next up is Alejandria Tenorio, co-founder of Manicurista, who talks about what it's like transitioning from the mostly male-dominated oil and gas industry into tech. And then Cory Siskind, founder of Base Operations, a Magma Partners portfolio company, shares her experience being a female founder crossing borders in Latin America and the US. Next up, we get an investor's perspective from Elevor Equity's managing director, Joanna Posada, who talks about genderless investing. Then we close it out with Nextbiotics Maricel Sainz advice for women getting into tech, and end with Ubit's co-founder, Marta Forero, a Magma Partners portfolio company, about how the ecosystem can be more gender inclusive and advice for women on how to raise money in Latin America and the US. I hope you enjoy this podcast featuring 7 women who are changing Latin America for the better. I hope to see you all at WeXchange next week. Jackie Hyland from A55 kicks off this conversation talking about why having women involved in the founding team is important. Studies show having gender-balanced teams improves returns for investors and for founders. Jackie talks about why. If you want to hear the rest of Jackie's podcast about how debt can help LATAM founders, check out episode 69.
Yeah, I think something I've reflected about quite a bit, especially in myself and in my role in seeing and supporting other women and creating these networks of support. I think the higher, the great thing is there's a lot more data now than there was when I kind of started about 10 years ago, but that diversity in general is just so good for business and it's great for the long-term health of a project or a business. And not only that, sort of just creating more economic opportunity for people in a country to be able to provide more and then invest back in their families. Women are clear examples of some of the best investors and sort of back into their communities, back into their families. So just as in my opinion, sort of net positive with the numbers, but also I think personally for me, thinking about future generations of women, thinking about, my daughters and the daughters of my friends, having just general more opportunity to be able to do more things and achieve any goal that they have.
Next up is Lab4U's Komal Dadlani, who talks about raising money as a female founder in LATAM and the US. In episode 63, Komal talked about investors in a specific way, and we joke about it before she shares her full perspective. Listen to her entire episode called Turning Smartphones into Science Labs to hear her full story.
So in most of that response, you referred to investor as he and him. And you are a female founder.
Yes.
What's that been like being a female founder, either raising money, making sales, and also the comparison between how you've been treated in Latin America versus the US?
Yeah, well, you can tell the difference. And when I feel the difference, when I feel that a potential investor is treating me differently than what he would treat a male entrepreneur, for me it's a no-no. I can tell. It's very obvious. You can even tell when an investor has been an entrepreneur and one who has not been an entrepreneur. Huge difference in the conversation, in the quality of the questions, in the suggestions. In the funds, all my angel investors are men. All the fund investors are men, except one, which is Marta from NextDP. But she's part of a team also, like Gonzalo, Ariel, and Marta. I feel very comfortable speaking with her, and she's the one who's also looked after me as a human, like, come on, are you resting? Like, how's your health? And very encouraging. But the rest are all men.
what's it been like raising money and then even doing sales as a female entrepreneur? And is there a difference between Latin America and the US? Or in Latin America, is there a difference between the countries?
I see more differences here, even in the way they treat you outside or inside the meeting room. Even when I sell like the product to physics teachers who are almost men, like the American Association of Physics Teacher, all of them are men. So I go and they were all men, all physics teacher, the leader was a man. I went with my colleague who's also a man. Thank God he went there because they were speaking with him. He was new in the company, but I wanted him to do the sell. It was like part of the process, and they were all talking to him, speaking to him. But when the technical questions came, my gentleman-like colleague, who's fantastic, he's like, so that those technical questions, I will go to my colleague Komal, who's the scientist, and she'll be able to answer. So I'm like, yeah, and the acceleration versus time graph, this is what happened, and the sonometer, the Fourier transformative analysis, blah, blah, blah. And after I had to prove them that I knew my shit, they would look at me. Otherwise, I was just ignored as a female assistant. It's very common. Even in events, I go, I'll give you an example here. I went to an event, entrepreneurs, I was ignored until someone else said like, hey, are you Komal from La4U? You're based in Silicon Valley now. I've heard you guys are doing great. That's when people started looking at me. Otherwise, I was just ignored, sitting there with my orange juice, when the rest were with their wine glasses. And they were speaking about small things, about an investment from this and that of $25,000 because of a cap, which is a very low cap, and they couldn't. I raised more money with a higher cap. They didn't even, mind in asking, hey, what does your company do? Do you have any suggestions? I could have helped them, but they ignored me completely. It's very common, especially, I would say, more in Latam and in the Bay Area as well. I think that's changing though. Well, my current investors, the thing is, my current investors, most of them are parents. For example, one of my angel investors, he's a father, and he respects his wife, his daughter. He's like, no, I'm not the smart one. My wife is the smart one. So they're people who respect women and men equally, and you can tell the difference. Those are the kind of people you want in your company.
In episode 72, I sat down with Alejandria Tenorio from Manicurista, a Colombian entrepreneur who's using technology to help improve the lives of beauty professionals in Latin America. We talk about her background in the oil and gas industry and how it's similar and different to working in another male-dominated industry, technology. You've been in fairly stereotypically male-dominated industries in oil and gas and now in entrepreneurship.
Yes.
How has that been, and what kind of experience have you had?
Yeah, the oil and gas industry is very male dominated. It is starting to change. And when you prove yourself and when you prove results, that was the way I think I gained respect. So it is more difficult, of course, in an oil and gas industry for a woman to raise your way up. But I definitely had the opportunity to prove myself and prove we could definitely open Latin America and make a business of the oil and gas industry in Latin America as well. So yeah, that's that's part of our startup as well. It's a completely opposite from the oil and gas industry to the beauty industry. But my co-founder and I have a common goal, and is that we want to definitely empower women and transform the beauty industry, because we want to dignify this profession that sometimes doesn't have the right dignity in Colombia or even in the States. Beauty professionals have to work like endless hours at the beauty parlor, and they have to meet a schedule, they have to wait for customers, and they can't sometimes make decisions and have quality of life. And that's because they have also like very low wages, and this creates like an underground economy in Latin America. So it forces beauty professionals to work under these conditions. So our goal is definitely to make an impact in our society, and especially women. We want to dignify and of course make sure we increase women's capacity to make choices and make their desired actions, because sometimes they don't have it.
In episode 81, Cory Siskind and I talk about using technology to secure global workforces. Cory has good news. She just recently raised $1 million from funds including Magnum Partners and many U.S. funds. She talks about what it's like raising funds as a female entrepreneur, both in Latin America and in the US. What's been your experience being a woman in entrepreneurship?
I think it's a wonderful place for women to be. There's obvious challenges. So the widely cited statistic is that 2% of venture capital goes to female founders, and that's obviously much worse for female founders of color. But that's shocking. I mean, 2%. The people that know it well, because it impacts them, and then other people are their jaws drop when they hear that. So there are a lot of challenges, like institutionalized challenges like that. But I do think that entrepreneurship is so great for women in so many ways. It really allows you to express, to sort of culminate all of your experience and create something, solve a problem that something about. And you don't have to necessarily fit into a rigid structure of a company that already exists. You can create your own culture. You can create your own solution. So I think, in that way, it's a great path for women. But yeah, there's certainly challenges, and I think I combat that through communities of female entrepreneurs. So I'm here in Washington D.C. I have a group of female entrepreneurs in security that I have dinner with occasionally, and we'll just talk about different challenges of being women in this particular industry that's so male dominated. So being women entrepreneurs, which is a minority, selling into an industry that's pretty male dominated. But I also think, people want to help, and I think there's an appetite for a change, and people want to see more female entrepreneurs and invest in them. So I also feel really lucky to have benefited from a lot of women and men that want to right the disparity in funding.
And what advice would you give to other women who are just thinking about getting into entrepreneurship?
I think women tend to be more risk averse, and it's one of the reasons they avoid entrepreneurship. I think we're lucky to live in the U.S., which is a country that doesn't stigmatize failure as much as other countries. And so I think I would tell women to just go for it. And there's, if it doesn't work out, like there's a 90% chance, 95 that it won't, based on statistical success of companies. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a failure. You learn so much along the way. And, just the experience of jumping into the deep end of the pool, you never know what can happen. So I would say just go for it. Don't overthink it.
One of the other... In episode 79, Joanna Posada, Managing Director of Elevar Equity, and I sit down to talk about driving impact in Latin America via venture capital. Joanna is one of the most experienced Latin American women in venture capital in the region, investing in Latin America and in India. She talks about how she tries to look at companies through a genderless lens, both investing and empowering in women, both as founders and as the clients of the company she invests in. It has gotten a lot of press and a lot of people talking about in the last year or so is inclusion for women, both as investors and as founders. Being one of the more active female investors in the region, what's your take on it?
Great. Yeah. So women and investing in gender lens. So there has been quite a bit of efforts lately on this topic. The IDP is pushing a huge initiative under genderless investing, and there's a lot of cohorts and working groups pushing this, and I've been working with them, and they've interviewed me, etc. I would say for any endeavor effort, be it a company, be it a board, be it an investing practice, I do think that adding a woman and the perspective of a woman in general will lead to better decisions. It's gonna be additive. We've never had a policy of saying, our entrepreneurs need to be women. At the end of the day, we're just looking for the best entrepreneurs that care about their company, care about growing the company, care about impact, and can execute. That's been our position with entrepreneurs. Thankfully, I would say in the past few years, we're starting to see more women entrepreneurs. So something happening in the market where, again, we're getting at least that pipeline. And again, we're not choosing them because of their gender, just because they're extraordinary entrepreneurs. And I would say the first two investments of the fourth fund were women entrepreneurs. So one in Latin America, the other one was a couple, and then there's a kind of a woman co-founder. The other thing I would say, and actually I presented on Finovista on this, and it was women in fintech. One thing I also noticed quite a bit is that there are a lot of women co-founders in the sector. The funny thing is that we don't hear as much from them. So, I spoke to a bunch of people. I spoke to a lot of, again, of this co-founders or people, whether it's investors or people that have looked at studies this, and 40 to 50%. I mean, it was a big percentage had women co-founders, and yet the visible kind of partner and voice and kind of face of the companies were the men. So I do think that there needs to be an effort to bring them up and have them be visible, because I think it just, again, it talks about a potential balance, which I do think leads to better results. But it's also hard to just limit yourself to say, I'm going to be investing in women, because you do want to have a big pipeline from which to choose from. Now, having said that, what we are doing now at Elevar, and we weren't doing before, is we are looking at not only at the level of the CEOs and the founders, but also at the level of the management teams, and going through that and collecting that data on what role women plays within our portfolio. So that is something that we're doing much more of now.
In episode 76, I sat down with Maricel Sáenz, co-founder of Next Biotics, a biotech company trying to defeat the next superbug. We talk about what it's like raising funds as a female founder and a Latin American founder. And you talked about making sure to be taken seriously because of being young. In addition to being young, you're a female co-founder in a science business in tech. And there's been lots of talk about hurdles that women have to get over to extra compared to men in business like this. Have you experienced any of that? And what's your experience been like being a woman co-founder of a biotech company?
The best answer I can tell you is I don't know how hard it is in comparison, because this is the only thing I've ever done. But it is, it's hard in the sense that sometimes you will get questions that I know male founders don't get. All the way from one time I had an investor asking me if me and my co-founder were dating, and I said, absolutely not. And then he said that that's something that I should say in my pitch because people see that as a risk. And I'm like, I am 100% sure you don't ask that to guys. You're not asking guys to say in their pitch what their marital status is, right? That is super unfair. And then they do, and when I was able to see comparison between, for example, having one of my friends go pitch to the same investor before, and then I would go next, you could definitely see how they treat you differently because of this amazing movement of Me Too and women speaking up. It has also kind of backlash to men being then I can't really even be in a room with you. You know what I mean? I need 3 feet away. And that makes it really hard when you're trying to create a connection with someone and create rapport and trying to work together if they're just trying to stay super, super far away. And the other thing that, so I think women, and we face a very different scenario when we go fundraising. We all know that only 2% of venture capital funding goes to women, and that hasn't changed. Although people are oh, there's so many women raising money, that was the same for 2018. Hopefully it's not the same for 2019. But another angle at it is that I'm not only a woman, but I'm Latin American, and so is Jorge. So we belong to an even smaller minority. And I actually think that sometimes that's been harder than being a woman. That's been harder when talking to investors. I've seen the tone of voice change when we maybe talk about our backgrounds and how we're not really from here. And that's one that's not talked about a lot, and there's not a lot of support about that. But yeah, if you look at the numbers, it is 2% of funding goes to women, but only 1% goes to Black and Latin Americans. So for us, it's it's harder on both ways. But what we try to do is just lead with what we're working on, right? Lead the conversation and try to take it away from who we are and what we look like, and more into what we're working on and how important it is. And I think that having an attitude of being it doesn't matter who I am, it matters what I'm doing and why that's why you should care about it, has helped us have those conversations in a more maybe objective way. I think the solution to this is to have more female founders. I get asked a lot, what I think could change. A lot of people think that we could have more women VCs, but it's been understood that it's a cycle because a lot of VCs end up being successful entrepreneurs. So the more female founders that we have will tend to hire more females in their first few hires when they're walking away with a little bit of stock, which allows them to invest, which makes more female investors, which hopefully kind of changes a little bit the conversation. But I think women should be encouraged to be entrepreneurs and not be scared by the fact that it might be hard to raise money, but it's hard for everyone.
Next up is Marta Forero, co-founder of Ubits. Check out episode 74 to learn about how she's driving economic growth in Latin America via corporate education. We talk about her advice to female founders for raising money in the region and also for dealing with sales, especially when selling to older male audiences. What's it like being a female founder in LATAM?
Okay, so first, I was really afraid on going to YC because I was the only Latin American girl in the batch. And I was so afraid because sometimes you believe that being a female founder, it's going to stop the VCs from investing in your company. So at first I was talking to Julian and saying him I'm so sorry if they don't invest in you because I'm a female founder. So because if you see all of the charts and all of the things, you can see that the charts are really negative for women. So that's changing, but that's not changing in a really fast way. So for me, I was afraid of that. That was the only point. But being with another girls and being also with the boys made me realize that there is no any issue on being on tech and being a woman and being a Latin woman. So that was great for me. I haven't had any bad experience from that. I believe that we need more tech girls because there are not a lot of tech girls and Latin girls from making these kind of solutions. So I believe there's a lot of opportunities to make it, and we need to work on that.
What are some of the ways that you think that the ecosystem could do a better job of working on it?
I believe that first working on the little girls. For example, there is a program, and I was that day on EA Sports, in which they grab some girls from schools and they teach them to program, and they teach them things in business schools and things like that. And I believe we need more conferences and more empowering conferences of girls who can make it, because our culture is always saying that you have to have kids and you have to have a husband and you have to be in your home. And this is happening right now. There are some people who ask me, oh my God, but you are making this, you are making your company right now is big, you have to travel. But when you are going to make a big company, sorry, when you are going to make your family, you are not thinking in your family. And that's things in which they make you get into that paradigms, and that's not it. We need to study a lot, sometimes, and this is for women and men, but you need to learn about your company a lot, and you need to be prepared, because sometimes questions for us are tougher than for men. But we have to remember that being in a small business involves patience and times, and requires you to be in a goal each one of the days. Second, be patient. Sometimes we are always running and we want everything right now, and you have to be just patient and know. Sometimes I know that's a bad advice, but you cannot hear everyone, because at first they start telling you you have to do this as a woman, you have to do that. If you travel, they are going to your husband or your boyfriend, it's going to be with another girl, and this and this and this, and there are a lot of things. For example, when I went to Silicon Valley, someone told me, oh Marta, if you went there, they are going to grab your man and you are going to be alone. And I was like, oh my God, this is so from another era. But sometimes, and don't be afraid, because when you start working, people can make you feel very small, especially when you're in a male dominated business environment. So what you need to do is be very confident, and don't let people make you doubt yourself in what you are making. I believe at first, because of you are not as confident, you believe you are going to be rejected, but it's always don't take it personally, and just get your plan, just work a lot in your plan, and help another woman, start empowering them really. And also, I don't know, keep focus on what you are doing. Like, don't let, you can be a mom, and you can be, I'm not a mom, but you can be a mom, and you can have your family, and you can be a lot, and you cannot feel intimidated, especially in front of investors, because sometimes you get intimidated by the VCs, but you are much better than them. Like, you have a great idea, you are gaining money, you are in this business, you know more than them of your ecosystem, so don't be afraid.
Thanks again for listening to this special episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig. If you enjoyed this style of episode, please let me know. We're thinking about doing more. This episode was brought to you by ladtimelist.com. Please check it out if you want daily tech news reporting. Thanks to Angel, Sofia, and Josefina for helping produce this podcast, and to the women who we featured on this podcast. Have a great day.